Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. In this video I'm going to take a look at the best Hearthstone meta decks after the Shaman Nerf. The Shaman Nerf actually had a great effect on the meta. The meta was highly polarized, there were tons of Shamans around, tons of Rogues around, then there were decks that were trying to counter those. And when Shaman was nerfed, and then to a lesser extent Rogue was nerfed with the Edwin nerf, the meta just shattered into pieces. So right now what we're seeing is a very diverse meta. There are tons and tons of different decks around, and we don't have the new top meta candidates yet that would then be targeted, and then the meta would start to stabilize. So in the early days we have seen stuff like, for example, Druid benefiting greatly from Shaman going down, but then there were a bunch of aggro decks, there were 2 Warlocks, there were Enhancement Shamans, and those pushed Druid kind of out of the meta already. And right now it's a very delicate balance where a lot of these Jack of all trades, master of none decks seem to be doing pretty well, because they are well equipped into a metagame where decks have like 6% popularity, 5%, just tons and tons of different decks around. So I expect that in the coming week, 2 weeks, we're going to see some of these decks be fine-tuned and starting to take a more dominant position, and then we start to get counters to those and we start to get a bit more solidified meta. But for the time being, some of these Jack of all trades, Master of none decks seem to be pretty good choices. So, on my top list there are 7 decks in this video, and on number 7 there's Highlander Paladin. I played Highlander Paladin recently myself, I played Demon's list, and there are a few competing Highlander Paladin lists around, and this one seems to be doing the best right now. And well, Highlander Paladin, it's kind of doing okay against most things. It's a little bit weak against Rogue, but it's doing fine everywhere else. But it doesn't have a lot of major strengths either, so I'm kind of perplexed as to why does it work, even though I recently played the archetype myself. It just resembles mid-range Paladin of old, with this continuous turn after turn you play good cards and you gain a bit better position, and somehow in this fractured metagame that seems to be working. That said, if I were to pick a Paladin deck, I would still pick Broom Paladin first. Broom Paladin is doing well in the current meta. It's strong in the mirror, it's better than Highlander Paladin in the mirror, it has some strengths against like Hunters, also shares a bit of weakness against Rogue. This Broom Paladin deck is almost the same that I recommended at the end of December. There's only been one change, so cutting 1 Blessing of Wisdom for a Hammer of the Naru. Double Blessing of Wisdom turned out to be a little bit heavy, whereas Hammer of the Naru is a great threat, and also with the Taunt Minion, great defensive asset. Coming in at number 5 is Zoo Warlock. I first mentioned that Zoo Warlock is starting to get back into the meta in December after the last set of nerfs, and now after the Shaman nerfs, Zoo Warlock is actually currently the most popular deck in the game. Whether that's going to last, we're going to have to wait and see, because Zoo Warlock doesn't have a lot of great strengths against other good meta decks. Its strongest matchups are like Druid and Face Hunter, which are not exactly top meta decks, and it has some weaknesses against Rogues and Demon Hunters, for example. The Zoo Warlock list here is 2 cards different from the one that I recommended in December. This one now runs double Manari Mosher instead of double Reckless Rascal. Rascal is a little bit better when you really want to limit the amount of mana available to your opponent, but because we're seeing a bit more aggressive metagame here, then Manari Mosher with its lifesteal is generally better than limiting the mana of the opponent. Enhancement Shaman is another deck that I already showcased back in December, and it has solidified its position. It's also one of these decks that does well against a wide variety of threats. It's an aggro deck, so it always has a chance because it can just outrace you. But its main strength again against Druid, these are things that Druid got up a little bit after Evolved Shaman Nerf, and now these sorts of decks have really been pushing Druid out, while they're also having a reasonable matchup against most other decks. But there are some weaknesses against Paladin, with the Enhancement Shaman in particular. This is almost the same list as I've showcased in December. 1 copy of Cumulo Maximus has been cut. Cumulo Maximus has been the weakest performing card in the list, and that has in this case been replaced by an Urchok. There's also a version that runs Devolving Missiles, but that seems to be a little bit weaker than Urchok. I'm not sure if either of them is yet optimal. There are still some optimizations going on with Enhancement Shaman, but just being very aggressive, pushing phase, doom-hammering people, especially when there's a little bit less weapon removal around, seems to be a good working plan. As for the number 3, well, Highlander Hunter, it's back. It had a bit of a tough time against Evolved Shaman, but now with Evolved Shaman gone, Highlander Hunter has a bit more time again. This sort of Highlander Hunter deck that puts a little bit more emphasis on the secrets and also runs stuff like Explosive Trap seems to be the better option right now because of the general aggressiveness of the meta. Highlander Hunter really shines by not having a lot of bad matchups. It always has a chance. It's a very flexible deck. And in this sort of very fractured metagame, these types of decks are very, very good. Did somebody nerf Rogue, by the way? I thought somebody did. Anyway, Rogue is still doing fine. Rogue might even be doing better now than before, which is quite astonishing. Also, this list is the exact same list that I recommended in December. It's still doing great. Headwind Cleave now costs 4 mana. Doesn't matter. Whirlkick Rogue, just play a lot of cards, generate even more cards. How can you even get rid of all those cards that you have? I don't know. But doing that, generating some major threats and just winning the game. It's a great plan to have. Some people have been dusting their Headwind Cleaves, and if you have done that and you want to play Rogue, it is still possible. Currently there is a version of this deck that instead of Headwind Cleave runs an SI7 agent, so very straightforward replacement, and that's also doing very, very well. Although SI7 agent is the weakest card in that particular list, so I'm not sure if that list is optimal, it probably isn't. But yeah, with Edwin, without Edwin, Rogue with its immense tempo and resource generation just keeps staying at the top. However, when it comes to a fractured meta, a fairly aggressive meta, what do you want to play when you're facing a lot of aggressive decks? You want to be playing Warrior. Warrior can destroy all of that aggression, then they just get some armor and chill. And this is currently the best performing Warrior deck. It's an ETC Enrage style Warrior deck. So it has this full Pirates and Bomb Wranglers and Inner Rage is this Enrage package, but the win condition, instead of being Cochrane Elites and Grom, there's the animated broomsticks and the ETC God of Metal. And that kind of makes sense, because this Risky Skipper style package is really good at defending against aggression and generating a lot of armor, and then ETC combo is pretty good when most of everything is board based. Overall, this is the most diverse meta we have seen in Hearthstone for a long time, and there are lots of decks other than these 7 decks also that can get you all the way to Legend. Although I don't expect this to last forever, I do expect that some top decks will be found and then we start to move into that meta again where we try to counter the top decks and see just how well they hold, but we're not there yet, so lots of options available, and right now these 7 decks in this video are the best ones you can play if you want to climb the Hearthstone ladder. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more.